Now, one of the things we need to do to understand this spatial context is to look at the site formation processes. So how is the archaeological record formed at that particular place? And there are two kinds. There are cultural and there are natural site formation processes. Now we want to try to determine what natural processes are going on first, because once we rule those out, then the only explanation for an artifact being somewhere is a cultural process. So natural processes include physical agents like a volcano. We have a lot of archaeological sites that have been buried by volcanic eruption, not just Pompeii, but another site we'll talk about later in the quarter called Quiquilco. Water also does quite a bit of movement around of artifacts. Biological agents are another natural formation process, so burrowing animals in particular can do a lot to disturb a site. Cultural processes include things like scavenging, plowing, mining, might just be discard, people might be reusing things. So there's a lot of human activities that disturb the archaeological record, and it's important for us to try to figure out what those are. And again, that can help us determine some function of the site as well. Now, what we find at the site depends on preservation conditions, and preservation is highly variable. It depends on the type. So something that's organic has much less chance of surviving versus something that's inorganic. Size matters in this particular context, so something that's bigger is generally going to last longer in the archaeological record. Now, the main agents of decay are things like bacteria, because that works on all sorts of organic things. So if you are favorable, preservation conditions are going to limit the growth of bacteria. So we're looking at environmental extremes here. So extreme dry, so deserts, and caves that are dry are really, really great. So in China they found some naturally mummified bodies. A mammoth cave, which is in Kentucky, also has great preservation because the deeper you go into the cave, the drier it becomes. Extreme wet, so like peat bogs, are really, really good. And in fact in Europe, and we'll probably get a chance to talk about this later in the quarter, we have hundreds of bodies that have been found really well preserved in peat bogs because it's the tannins help to preserve the skin and so forth. So anything that's going to help, again, delay or inhibit the growth of bacteria. Extreme cold is another one, so ice. We found a lot of ice mummies. So like in 1981 they found several members of an Arctic expedition that was lost in 1845, and from these bodies they were able to determine that the cause of death was actually lead poisoning, not freezing in and of itself. So there's some other ones. Mud is really good. Volcanic ash also, if it's something's buried, will preserve that pretty well. Again, anywhere where the growth of bacteria is inhibited. Good preservation though is the exception and not the rule. So time context. So again, archaeologists really concerned with space and time. We can do time context a couple of different ways. We have two basic types of methods. We have relative methods and absolute or chronometric methods. And this is how we order this several million years of human activity. So